out, board gamers, and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now in today's episode we're going to be previewing the solo of Inventions, Evolution of Ideas. It is Vita Lacerda's latest game. It hits Kickstarter on the 15th of June. The link will be in the description below. Now, Inventions is a 1 to 4 player game where you're going to take your society and you're going to present ideas, you're going to invent ideas, you're going to share them out into the world, you're going to have eureka moments, and you're going to evolve your society by kind of sharing your idea and taking it out there. Every time you share one, you get a new have a eureka moment and send it out there. You gain a new milestone and a new era to move forward to, and each invention that you have based on your knowledge of previous inventions, either you've invented or have gone into the common knowledge pile. It's really kind of an involved game spanning over eras. It is not a civilization building game. It is a society game where you're taking your society forward, but it is not a civ building, although a Vita Lacerda civ building game is going to be great. So as I say, it's 1 to 4 players, and as a solo game, so the solo mode itself has been designed by Vital, and then it's been further developed by Shelley Danielle and by John Albertson. And let me tell you, it works very, very, very well. You're going to be controlling 2 AIs, not as daunting as it sounds. The first AI is Chronos, and Chronos is going to work, excuse the pun, going to work like clockwork. It'll move around the board and will take a limited number of actions. They're essentially, should I say, a kind of nuisance, maybe presenting or inventing or sharing ideas before you get the chance to, and therefore, gaining the rewards that you may want to gain on that. And they're also going to rack up some points. Now, both Chronos and Hephaestus share a common score marker. And of course, the aim of the game is to try and beat their score, as well as get some accolades as well. It's not just a beat their score game. There are accolades you can aim for as well. So Chronos is relatively straightforward. Hephaestus is a little bit more involved than that and actually plays like another player. And in a stroke of design genius, it takes literally 5 cards, and that's it. Hephaestus has its own solo board, which is just really a place to store things, but in reality it's the 5 cards that drive their actions, and they're going to take some of exactly the same actions as you. They're going to have what's called chain actions, and I'll explain more on that in a wee while as well. And they play very much like another player, and they are really kind of scouring the board, picking up progress tiles, scoring points, blocking you, trying to stop you getting places, and it works really, really effectively, very, very well. So as like all Vita Lacerda games, it's got a pretty integrated player board, and that's right here. And this is your society board, and this is kind of where most of your end of game scoring is going to come. You have the tiles, the progress tiles you're going to place on here, and depending what wealth tiles you've got throughout the game, that's going to score your progress tiles on there. You've also got these chain action tokens, which allow you additional moves. So like all Vita Lacerda games, you get something like an executive action. It's the chain actions that happen here, and you can increase the number of chain actions that you get. It's a place that you're going to store your scholars and your specialists as well. So the 3 types of specialists: there's technology, there's culture, and there's economy, and then you have scholars, which are kind of wildcard specialists also. We have these things called influence tokens, which allow you to score some points on the board itself, and you're also going to start off with your pillars on there. That's right, to take your actions in this game, you use pillars of invention. There are 2 types of pillars. The smaller ones are season pillars, and then the larger one is an epoch pillar. Every round you're going to effectively take 3 turns. Your season pillars go onto the board, then each round they come back off, but your epoch pillar stays on the board and you have to move it to another action. I'll explain how that blocking works in a little bit. So that's kind of an overview. You're going to traverse a world, presenting ideas, inventing ideas, maybe innovating ideas and sharing those ideas, evolving your society so you can get better ideas out there, and which chain together nicely, of course. So for example, you potentially couldn't do, sailing without first having invented transportation. So each one links to the next one, and the aim of the game, of course, over 6 rounds is to have the highest score possible possible. And of course, there are multiple ways in doing that. The main way of scoring your points is going to be on the board. There is some in-game point scoring on your society board, should I say. There's some in-game point scoring on the board as well, but you cannot neglect and negate the power of your society board and what you do on there. So what I'll do, like all these preview videos, it's not an in-depth rule teach. I'm not going to go through each rule and each minutiae. It's going to be a brief overview on how the game works, how the solo works, and then a little bit of a discussion on the back end of it. So without much further ado, let's jump into exactly how you play the solo of Inventions, Evolution of Ideas by Vita Lacerda, published by Eagle Griffin Games. Hits Kickstarter on June the 15th. The link is in the description below. Okay, so here you can see everything set out for a solo game. Now, this is my player board here. So what you have here is your society board, effectively, and you can see these little hexes on there. These are where you're going to place progress tiles as and when you get them, and these are progress tiles. There are three types. The blue one is economy, you have culture, and you have technology, and you're going to place them on the board, and that's where most of your scoring is going to come from. You're also going to pick up what's called wealth tiles throughout the game, and these have various scoring criteria on there as well. That's essentially where most of your scoring is going to happen. You also got some personal goal cards as well, which you're going to kind of score against at the end of the game. But if we look at this board here, this is your society board, as I say. Over here are some inventions I've already got access to, so some level Era 1 inventions. They allow me some chain actions. Over here is an Era 2 invention, and this is cotton. And you can see over here on this side of the board, this is called the personal milestones. Okay, and there are one for each player colour, and mine is blue, my player colour, and I have a blue cotton milestone in there. So cotton has already been invented, basically, and that is there, if you like, yeah. So that will enable me to kind of send that out into the world and score off that card eventually. Hephaestus, who is purple, is on copper smelting, and Chronos is on red over there, which is mining. There's a level Era 3 card up there as well, which I may want to present at some point, but I can certainly present cotton because it's out here and I have knowledge of cotton. Here is where your specialists are. So you have scholars here. Scholars are effectively wild cards, if you like. You can use them as any specialist. Then we have economy, culture, and technology. And you can see there's two parts to it. Now, normally in this top part, they would be stood up, but just for the sake of the video, I've laid them down. And when you use these in certain cases, sometimes you're going to put them on the board. Other times, you're going to have to exhaust some of them, and you would move it from the top to the bottom effectively, and exhausting it, and then at the end of your round you can get them back again. I say scholars are wild cards. You can use them on the board mainly as any other type of a specialist, but also you could exhaust them as well. So say for example I needed to exhaust an economy specialist, I'll take a scholar and move that down into the economy specialist. That would come back up as an economy specialist. So that's kind of where you keep your specialist that will grow throughout the game. Over here are your chain action tokens. You're going to start the game with one chain action token. This is effectively your additional moves that you can make in a Lacerda game. How do you get more? You move up the influence track here. Next to the influence track, it tells you how many chain tokens that you've got, and therefore you will move up that track throughout the game, and you'll also go back down it as well as you spend influence. And the number that's how many chain tokens are at the right of it at the start of your turn is how many chain tokens you move over there that you can use throughout your turn. You get them to pull them back every turn. Then I'll just talk about this first. This is called an economy token. As I say, there are certain tiles, progress tiles that you put on the board. I'll just pull one of each three out. So we have, don't worry about the placement just yet. We have an economy tile on the right here, the blue one. We have a culture tile, and we have a technology tile. For an economy tile, okay, however many economy tokens you've got on here, each turn you get to put that on there and you can take that action. Of course, there are only 3 available in the game. Some of you may have to unlock, only 3 of them available on your board for the game Two of them you will have to unlock by putting a tile on top of them. They then go over there. But that means you can take that action every turn. For example, that allows me to add a citizen anywhere in the map. The culture tiles are enduring ones. Okay, so they are enduring powers throughout the game. And this particular one, you can see here, says that if I go for an influence move, that means I have majority in an area. I'll talk about that in a wee while. And finally, we have technology tokens, which are these brown ones here. Okay, these you're going to use a chain action on, and then you flick them over. They're one-time use only. It's going to cost you also an influence point, so that's why I said that influence track goes up and down. Final one that you're going to place are the wealth tiles that you get from sharing inventions. And I say, so this would allow me 3 points for every contiguous wealth token that I've got on the board. So if I'm chaining them together, each one would score me 3 points. And there's different ones on the board. You're going to put them on your board, and they are, as I say, your main kind of scoring criteria. Key thing about it, each one of these tokens and the wealth tokens, these all have a number. They all have a letter. You can only have one of each. So I can only have one brown number 1 on my board. I can't have another brown number 1. So you're restricted in what you can take on there. And then placing them on the board, as you do at the end of your round, you have to potentially spend influence, depending on how many tiles you've got here. And you may have to spend workers as well. The final thing that you'll see are these aspiration tiles. When you get granted a tile at the beginning, throughout your turn, you effectively orient that to whichever tile you get. So there we go, that's an economy tile. I'd slot that into my board there. Then at the end of my turn, when I get to kind of build and progress, I can then take the relevant tile and put it on the board anywhere, basically. So you're kind of pulling them back at the end of each turn. And because I've gone through kind of era 1 already, I've already got one of those on the board. Now, the other thing that you'll see are these pillars here. Okay, so these are my season pillars. These are a little bit smaller than what's called the epoch pillar, which I already have on the board, and I'll explain that in a second. So each round is going to consist of effectively 3 turns for me. The first 2 turns are going to be my season pillars, and I'm going to put them onto these action spaces here, which are called forums, and they allow me to do actions. The third turn every round is going to be your epoch pillar. Whereas my season pillars come back at the end of every round, the epoch pillar stays on there, and I have to move it to another available forum. Now the thing about the game is it locks you out, okay? So I already have my epoch pillar on here. That means I am locked out from placing my season pillars on those. You can't place it on either of those actions in that forum. That gives me only obviously four forums and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 actions to potentially take. After round 2, say I've gone there, I've then only got 3 forums available to me, so 6 actions for my final turn. And you're also restricted by where your opponent's pillars are as well. You may have to pay, certainly in the solo game, you're going to have to pay them influence points, and points if you place your pillar on where their spaces. So as I say, each round you can place 2 season pillars. You're going to move your epoch pillar to another available forum. Then at the end of the round, you're going to pull those back onto your board, or your 2 season pillars, and go into the next round effectively. So that's kind of the player board. Now, if we talk about the main board itself, so as I mentioned, these are the forums, and these are your actions that you can take in the game. If we look at the top 4, the top 4 here, these are effectively your core actions. As I talked about at the beginning, the idea is to present ideas. It's to invent ideas, and it's to share ideas, and you may get to innovate as well. And that's exactly what these actions are. And like all Vita Lacerda games, there's a sequence, and Ian O'Toole's artwork is fantastic, and you follow that sequence on the board. Presenting an idea is taking one of these ideas here, and you're going to put it out onto the board. So you have various regions on the board there. So I could, if I decide to take a present action, okay? So I'm taking that action. Let's just ignore that other column for the time being. Okay, I would take one of the ideas I've got against the right hand side of my board, and I would place it onto an available region on the board. Okay, and then I would do that, And then you can see you've got these kind of specialist tiles next to each of them with various meeples on there. I would place the relevant number of meeples on there and I would get to take the benefit of what's underneath that tile. Doesn't mean anything yet, it just means I put something out there into the world. Somebody's got to invent it. I've said, hey, has anybody thought about, I don't know, silent Velcro? And then, but it's a great idea, fantastic. Never thought about thinking about that before. I presented that idea, right? So that's what's effectively happened there. So that's that action. Then we go down to invent here, which is this action. And this is where even if you presented it, you can invent it. You actually come up with the solution. You come up with an idea. You say, yes, excellent, I've invented silent Velcro. Okay, so obviously I couldn't take that out because my epoch pillar's on there. But like all these Lacerda games, there are parachutes. If you think you can't take a core action here, have a look at some of the chain action abilities or some of these special actions or special tiles that you can get out there, which allow you to potentially take an action you may be blocked off from the board. So first of all, when you invent an idea, you've got to make sure that you hit the milestone. So that means that you must have knowledge of what is needed to create that. So for example, if we take this, for example, this card here, it says if I wanted to invent silk, I must have knowledge of cotton. You can see in the personal milestones here, this one's in blue. I have a meeple on there. That means I have knowledge of that milestone. That means I have knowledge of cotton. I can invent that. However, if this was out on the board and I wanted to invent steel, if you look where iron is, at the moment it's still over here in this display over here. It hasn't even gone out into the milestones or the common knowledge. That means I can't invent that yet. If that was out on the board, I wouldn't be able to invent it because it's not either in my knowledge or in common knowledge. So you have to make sure that you're checking the milestones. Then you can set an aspiration tile to brown. That means at the end of my turn, I get to choose and potentially build a technology aspiration. Then I get to place one of my specialists onto the relevant card. So say for example we said it was going to be let's see, not copper smelting, something that I can actually, this one here, okay, so which is musical notations. Okay, it says you must have knowledge of origins of language. Origins of language is in the common display here. This is the personal milestones. This is the common display. These are the next milestones to come out, and then you'll have a public knowledge display of everything that's previously been invented. So to do that, I would take we said it was this one. I need to take a culture specialist because it's culture and put it next to the board there. So we will take a culture specialist and we would put that there, and then you would flip that over, and that's it. I've now invented that. That means when that gets shared, I get some benefit from that. Okay, so that's kind of, I've invented. The next thing here is to share. You can see that's where Hephaestus has gone. Okay, so this is where you send the idea out into the world effectively. When you share an invention, the idea owner gains points equal to the number of citizens and the era that it's at. So for example, if Hephaestus was sharing this, which he could do, he's got coloured meeples against it, you have to have the right coloured meeples. You've got 2 citizens on there, it's an era 3 card, and therefore he would score 6. So that would move Hephaestus up 6 on the board, okay? So that's and those citizens would then go to that relevant area just there. Next, the inventor gets the invention and the citizen goes to the map. So I would claim that invention. Why do I want to claim that invention as the inventor? Because it gives me this ability for this chain action here, okay? So that, if I use my chain token at the right time, I could take an action, chain onto that, and be able to present an idea at the same time. Also, so that goes next to my board. That citizen then goes to the map. The innovator, we didn't innovate yet, does there, and then the active society takes a wealth token. Remember how I said that those wealth tokens are really important for you? Absolutely. That's how you get these wealth tokens here. And then I would effectively place that in my display down here and choose when to put that into the board. Of course, Hephaestus did it, so they would keep that for their own personal scoring. Okay, so that's kind of sharing. That's what happens there. Or you can take a wealth token, or you can set an aspiration token to wild and choose whatever. The other thing you can do as a core action is innovate. So if an idea has been shared and it's been invented, you can also innovate that idea. Now, if you haven't invented it, you can innovate it. If you have invented it, You can't innovate. You can't make better your own invention. You've invented something, somebody's come along and said, hey, I've got a way of making that better. That's innovation. And what that allows you to do is effectively, when you innovate, is you send a specialist to the matching invention. So each one has got an innovation area. You gain one specialist matching that invention. So here for technology, I would have to put a technology specialist or a scholar there. I would gain one anyway. They would go back in there, so it's a nice way of growing your scholars and your specialists as you innovate. And then you may perform the chain action as well. So this is where the chain tokens come in. There are numerous places on the board in pink that allow you to do a chain action, and that's effectively what that is there. So if I'd got a chain token left, I'd put it on there, and that would allow me to take an influence action, basically, had I innovated. So that's kind of the core actions: present, invent, share, and maybe innovate. Then we have a look at some of the kind of remaining 6 here, okay? This one here, this economy action, allows you to pull your workers back from the board. So you would pull them back and they would go back to the specialism of whatever card is below there, basically. And you would also gain your aspiration token set to economy. So you get to choose an economy tile, basically. And you would get to perform a chain action on any of the cards that you invented that are to the left of your board. And this bit is where it becomes really interesting. You can see the meshing mechanisms now. So it opens up the number of chain actions that you get to take, basically. So that is kind of pulling your specialist back from the board. Influence action. If you hit the minimum amount of people that are required on the map that's dictated on these influence tokens here, and you have the majority, then you get to put an influence token out on the board, and that's these things here. Now what they do, you can only put them in an area that you haven't got an influence token on, but they also score you points. So depending on where you are, you can see the number of points here. There's 664. You would obviously aim for the highest score. So if I was to go there, for example, I would instantly score 6 points, but it gives me a potential chain action token there. I would then also score influence based on the number of influence markers I've got out on the board. So that would give me another influence there, basically, which moves me up this influence track, which gets me closer to getting another chain token, and also for end of game scoring, depending on where you are on there, it gets you some points as well. But also there's a chain action involved there, which allows me to use my chain token, if I've got it, on one of my influence markers out there and do that action and flip that over. So that would effectively flip that over and I would use that action. So you can see the value of these chain tokens. The more you have, the more you can do. And you start to feel a little bit godlike as the game starts to progress. This is a travel, so you can move your citizens around the board to the next space. There are some tiles that allow you to move more than one citizen and more than 2 spaces. So I could move from there to there. I would take these brown ones, which are called sages, okay, and I would put that on there. But it also gives me, guess what? It gives me a chain action. So what can I do? I could use my chain action to either do the action that's on there, okay, or I could score 2 points and flip that tile over. And if there's other flipped over tiles on there, you can actually flip them all back to 0. So yeah, again, the travel is a great way of moving around the board and a great way of getting sages, and which is really, really powerful because each one of those creates another scholar for you. And it's also a great way of chaining stuff together, of creating more moves. So as I say, you're not wholly reliant on what goes on in here for kind of all of your actions. These will unlock further actions for you. Your chain tokens will unlock further actions for you. You can start to see everything start to fit here. This one is your eureka moment. So this is when you would take one of your ideas or one of your milestones here, so say in cotton, and I would move it out into the common knowledge display. I would say, yeah, I'm ready to share that. Why would I do that? Okay. So at the moment, so that's in era 2, which is here, which is where my marker is, okay? So if I did Eureka, I would move all those down there. There is an order to it if there are lesser numbered one. That goes out into the public display now, so everybody knows about that. And I would take one of these here, okay, from the next era, or whatever era is on there. So say I take iron, put one of my citizens on there, but that's now got era 3. I would move my marker to era 3, which is the next era on, and it would allow me to take, guess what, another action up here. So I could change the play order. I could add a citizen to the board. I could take an innovate action, or I could gain an influence. Look at that. Suddenly, my influence has gone up now. In just a couple of moves, I'm now in a position at the start of my next turn, I get to have 2 chain tokens. So that is really important as well. You're sharing that, you're getting that idea out there, and you also suddenly have knowledge of iron. So I've got iron, that means now I can invent steel. Okay? Look at all these wonderful ways it actually connects. But, as I say, look at this action here. You know, you have to have knowledge. It has to be in the common knowledge. It has to be out in the public display, or you have to have a meeple on it. And guess what? This action allows you to send a diplomat out to one of your others. Say if I wanted to learn copper smelting, I could do that. And you know what it does? It allows me to take that action there as well, which is fantastic. It's another way of doing actions. Of course it is, yeah? So suddenly I've got knowledge of copper smelting, and it allows me to add a technology scholar, technology specialist to my board for that. This final one, I get to pull them back. And do you know what happens when you pull them back? If you got them on there, you get to take the action that's on there as well. So there's a myriad ways of actually opening that up. So each round, as I say, you're going to move, place 2 of your season pillars, minding where you can place them. You remember, I cannot place it on a place that's got another season pillar or my epoch pillar. Then the final one, I will move that to an available space, and then that would be the end of round. Then you go through something called an era change, and then you'll move into the next round. All the time you're progressing these wonderful inventions, you're moving them through, you're progressing your society, okay? Now, at the end of your turn, what happens is you get to do a few things. First of all, you get to get the number of chain tokens equal to your influence. So wherever these are on the board, suddenly I've got 2 chain tokens. Bear in mind, this is the end of your turn, not the end of the round, okay? You would place a pillar, okay? So that's your action. So your turn is this order. You get the chain tokens, you place a pillar, then I would substitute these, so I've got 2 of these down here for brown, for the relevant tiles over there. So these are my aspiration tiles. Remember, I can't have 2 of the same colour. 2 of the same number. So there we go. I've got 2 brown aspiration tiles which I can think about putting out on the board. Now I can build that on the board. I can build them. You are restricted. The era number that you're in, -1, is the maximum number of tiles that your progress tiles you can build. Bear in mind, this is really important. So moving that era up through the board is really important for you as well. So I could then build these onto the board, okay? I would pay influence equal to, a one-time influence at the beginning of this, equal to the next available left influence there. Now, if I've got 4 tiles there, great, I wouldn't pay any influence. That's 1 influence, that's 2 influence. So if I wanted to build this tile, I'd have to pay 2 influence. Look, it's knocked me down back into this area now, which means suddenly I've only got one chain token next. So say if I wanted to build this, okay, I would pay the cost of a specialist plus a specialist, or not a specialist, sorry, yeah, a specialist or a scholar, plus a specialist or a scholar for each adjacent tile that I'm placing it on. There's nothing on my board at the moment, okay? So let's say if I wanted to do this, I could place that. You do get a discount if you have any of this type of next to the board. I don't, basically. So if the inventions already, if I've got a technology invention here, I get a discount, or number of technology cards I got would give me relevant discount on scholars. I don't, so I'm going to have to exhaust that, and I'm going to put that on the board, and wherever I put it there, I get something. So say, for example, I wanted to have another technology scholar. I would put that up there, I would gain a technology scholar. And you get to do that at the end of each round, basically, okay? And that's kind of how the round works. So that's how the game works. You can do that over 6 rounds and move that accordingly. So let's have a look at Hephaestus and Chronos now, the solo part. So I've got Chronos in red here. Now I will say, of course, this is a prototype. some of these, well, they're certainly not the finalised assets, and the solo assets were digital, so I've had to print off the cards, print off the player board, and I was missing a couple of meeples as well. I was missing a Chronos meeple, which has disappeared, so I'm using a yellow column, and I was missing a Hephaestus meeple, so I'm using a proxy of a miniature from Warhammer Cursed City. Obviously there will be meeples in the game. Okay, so the order is generally going to follow at the beginning of the game. It'll be Chronos, me, then Hephaestus, but let's say I've gone. Let's just mess around with the order. I'll just show how Chronos and Hephaestus work. Chronos is in red. Really simple. He's effectively got 4 actions, and he's going to prioritize 3 of those actions, okay? So the first thing he's going to do is he's going to move his pillar to the next region. All the regions are numbered 1 to 7, so you follow them round in order. So he's in region 6 at the moment. He's going to move to number 7. There we go. He's in region 7. And his three core actions are to present, to invent, and to share. And innovate if he can, but essentially it's present, invent, and share. So we look here, okay, and we can see that this is here, and it is plumbing, but you need knowledge of copper smelting. Doesn't have knowledge of copper smelting there, so potentially can't present there. There's an idea already there. Can't invent because it's already there. Sorry, can't invent because he doesn't have knowledge of it. And he cannot innovate because it can't happen, basically, because it hasn't been invented. So he can't share it, he can't do any of those actions. So he's a little bit stuck on that particular term. But he's not, because what he's going to do, if he can't do any of those actions there, can't present, can't invent because he doesn't have knowledge of it, can't share, can't innovate. So what he's going to do is move to the next region and go through that again, basically. So here we go. We can see in the next region, there's nothing there. So that should have been moved up. So what he's going to do here is effectively take the rightmost out of the idea display, which is a constantly cycling display idea, put that there. Let's refresh those ideas there. And that's the end of Chronos' turn. If he was to invent, he'd put his people on there. And if he was to share, we'd go through the actions. And of course, depending on that, either myself or Hephaestus would score off the back end of that. That's Chronos. That's very easy. Let's talk about Hephaestus now then. So Hephaestus is a little bit different. So on the Hephaestus board, down here, let me just bring this into view. Okay. You can see I've got his season pillars on there. That's just to remind me what I need to do and when I need to move them. You have 3 spaces because he's going to take 3 turns just like everybody else. 2 season pillars and an epoch pillar. He starts with 1 chain action, but up on the top of the board there are other chain actions. As we move through the eras, he's going to collect between eras, I think it is 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. He's going to collect other chain tokens, so his ability to chain grows even more. Now, you have to forgive these are printed. I did have them in some sleeves, but the sleeves have got cards behind them and going to be hard to read. And you can see there are only 5 cards. So effectively what you're going to do is you'd shuffle this and you place that card there. And of course on the first one, throw it right way up, it's telling you which action to take. And the first one, it's the top one. If you can't take it, you move to the next one, and so on and so forth, etc. So here we go. It's asking me to place his season pillar in the invent forum over here. So here's what we'll do. We'll move his season pillar to there, but my season pillar's there already. What happens? I'm going to gain influence on the back end of that. Unfortunately, if I do it when Chronos is in Chronos's place, in Hephaestus's place, he's going to get points on the back of that. So I'll just move the camera up because we're going to have to go to the top of the board for this. Okay, so we're looking to invent for Hephaestus. So what we do for Hephaestus when he's looking to invent, because this is his top one and his top action here, we're going to look to the next available region where he can invent something that hasn't been invented yet, and also he has kind of access to via the milestones. So if we follow it around in clockwork way, this is the next available region here for this card where Chronos has shared the idea of a proto-city. But to do that, he needs knowledge of mining. At the moment, mining is in Chronos's personal milestone, doesn't have ability to do that, so can't invent that. So we carry on around here and we look at this area here, which is where they're going to move to. Now we know that Hephaestus has already shared this idea, and he's got the milestone of copper smelting, so he can invent this. So we take one of his meeples, we put that on there, Okay, and we flip that card over. Now, on my invention turn, I get to take a progress tile, and I would get to take a technology progress tile. However, I get to choose that. Hephaestus obviously doesn't get to choose. So what they do, they choose a progress tile of whatever type it is. This is technology, and the area, the region that they're in. Okay, so we're looking at region 7, so they're going to take that, put that on their board. That's going to give them some end of game scoring there. But there are also other things. So of course, Hephaestus, depending on which action, sorry, before I do that, so obviously for round 2, for the second action, I would look here, and that would be to present an idea, because it's the second one down. And for the third action, that would be this one here, which is to share an idea. You can see some of these have got chains there. That's because they're going to have a chain action as well, depending on how many chain tokens they've got and how many have been used. Okay, so that would be their 3 turns. And at the end of the round, what they do is they would effectively take these cards, shuffle them to the bottom of the deck where the cards that they use. So shuffle them, put them in the bottom of the deck, put them back there, and they're ready to use the next round. So yeah, Hephaestus kind of follows a similar structure to you. All the actions are available to Hephaestus. All of the chaining is available to Hephaestus. With their presenting, so taking an idea obviously and putting it out there, they move to the next region in ascending order that doesn't have a card, and they would place the required 1 or 2 citizens based on that onto the specialist tile. They don't score from those specialist tiles. If they want to share an invention, they move to where they can share it. You must have meeples next to it, so they must have invented, invented, or innovated there to be able to share the idea. They're going to take the card and put it next to their board if they've invented it, and that would effectively be some end of game scoring for them. And of course, if they presented it, they would get the relevant points from whatever's on the specialist tile. So we talked about the core actions: present, share, and invent. Innovate, they would move to an innovate wherever they can innovate, and that would give them access to then a chain action token. Okay, and a chain action, you follow kind of down from there. So chain actions, they would attempt to complete the next action down on the cards. So for example, if they did this innovate here and they had a chain token, what they would do then is they would then try to do the where they're pulling their workers back from the board basically as their action. And that's how the chain action would work. Travel, they're going to move around and they're going to effectively, like you do on travel, you're going to move their meeples around. This kind of helps with majority and influence, etc. But they're also going to take 2 IP, so 2 points as well, and flip the tile open and gain the sage onto their board, which at the end of the round they're going to put back on the board and get 2 points for every sage they've done that. They can call specialists, obviously call them back, gain it back to their tile, back to their board, and get a progress tile at the same time. Again, of the number and the number of the region and of the invention below it, and then they would do a chain action, gain influence. So influence is about kind of say putting these tokens out on the board there. They would effectively just block those tokens on there and have a chain action and score the IP on those actions they block there. Eureka, they would move everything across and they would gain IP based on the era of the milestone. They can send a diplomat, so they can move the diplomats out here, learn other technologies and gain IP, or so the points equal to the era. And then they would call the diplomat, and of course they would pull it back, and of course gain points, because what Hephaestus is a point grabbing machine. You're going to see them rack up the board. So you go through exactly the same motions as you would do in a 1 or a 2 player game, or sorry, a 2 player or more game, should I say. In this game, Chronos is very easy to do. Hephaestus, a little bit more involved, all makes sense. At the end of the game, you're going to score based on the cards that they've got there, their final score on there, and your scoring criteria that you've chosen for the tiles that they've got. There are modifiers. You can increase the number of points that each of these are worth or decrease them. And that's effectively it. As I say, feels like a lot, but in reality, once you understand the game, Hephaestus and Chronos work really, really, really well. There isn't a massive amount of rules overhead. And there we go. And that's an overview on how Inventions works and how the solo mode works for Inventions as well. Look, it's a Vida Lacerda game. I'm not going to cover an in-depth rules kind of teach in kind of 15 or 20 minutes, etc. So there are obviously loads of things that I haven't covered there, but you will get to learn them as you play the game. The main thing was just showing you kind of how the game works and then how the solo integrates that. And I think what Vital, Shelley and John have done with the solo mode is absolutely fantastic. It creates that feeling of having a busy board that's not too busy, but stuff happening all the time on every area of the board. You feel locked out in certain areas. You feel a challenge from Hephaestus and Chronos as this constant nuisance walking around the board. The rules overhead is light. You have 5 cards with various actions on there. So once you understand the rules of the game, then you're more or less going to understand certainly the actions that they're going to take. Now, of course, Hephaestus's actions on each of the... Hephaestus takes slightly different actions to your actions, or takes actions in a slightly different way to your actions, but it's nothing insurmountable. I think that's a key thing for a solo mode. I'm a big fan of a solo mode being as complex as it needs to be for the game. Don't get me wrong, I love a 0 overhead solo mode, but I also don't want to have a big game like this where a solo mode doesn't do it justice. And that's why I love the solo mode that David Turksey did for Weather Machine, is the fact that Weather Machine is a big and complex game, and the solo mode needed to be, have a level of complexity to it. This is not as intensive as the Weather Machine solo mode. Not by, Weather Machine is a lot more intensive than this because of the number of actions and number of permutations in that. This is easier to pass than Weather Machine, but it's not. I'm not saying that you should jump straight into the solo of this game when you get the game. I got it, I played it multi-handed, kind of 2.5, 3.5 times maybe, and taught a 3-player game where I got some of the rules wrong, a 3-player game before I even attempted the solo mode. And even when I jumped into the solo mode, I was still referencing kind of the rule books. Now, of course, I should imagine it will come with player aids. But once you played a few rounds, you really understand what Hephaestus needs to do as they move around the board. You'll get Chronos in no time whatsoever. That will make perfect sense, and you just continue to move Chronos around the board, and he can be his nuisance. Hephaestus, a little bit more Hephaestus, a little bit more investment, but nothing insurmountable. But what I do like is the challenge it creates. Now, this game, the beauty of this game comes in the number of times that you play it. The first time you play it, you're not going to be strategizing. You're still going to be parsing the rules and getting used to the rules. And that's why I certainly recommend you don't jump straight into the solo on the game. Like me, play it two-handed, which means you have Chronos on the board as well as a two-handed player, but that's great. Helps you get the rules down. The beauty of this game is the more you play it, the more you start, like all Vida Lacerda games, the more you start to realise those strategies. This is not a game to play one time and think, it's not for me. This is a game that you play and you think, right, okay, there's something there that I like, and I absolutely fallen in love with this game. As a multiplayer game, I'd love to play it with more people. As a solo game, it's fantastic. Set up and tear down, a little bit of a bear. Of course, it's a prototype, and knowing Eagle Griffin, they will have some wonderful, wonderful storage solution for it as well. Set up and tear down, a little bit of a bear. But the joy comes in kind of thinking and strategizing, knowing what's coming in future eras, understanding what's happening in the idea row, what inventions are going to come out, having a look at where your competitors are on the map, thinking about, do I need more influence this turn so I can get more chain action tokens? Those chain action tokens, as I say, once you start using those chain actions and you're pulling them back at the end of every turn, as is Hephaestus, so they get the same kind of power as you there, but you start to feel godlike the more of them that you get. And as I mentioned in the video earlier on, Lacerda generally always provides a parachute. If you're blocked out from an action on here, there's something on here or in here that means that you're in your chain actions here that means you can do it. Solo plays into that with Hephaestus continuing to chain, so as you feel more powerful, Hephaestus definitely gets more powerful, gets another chain action, chain token between eras 2 and 3, and another one between 4 and 5. So then he's got four chain tokens, which means that ability to chain and then chain on top of a chain and chain on top of a chain is really hitting home. Key things to remember are what you can do on this board, where you can place your pillars. and where Hephaestus can place their pillars as well. It's easy to remember it for you, but for Hephaestus, you know, you just got to make sure that their moves are legal, because you can, as I've done a couple of times in my early solo games, kind of made the game more difficult for me by managing to duplicate or make semi or illegal moves, if you like. Again, play it a number of times, put your pillars onto where you're placing your cards, and that means that you will then, as you put a card down, have to pick the pillar up, place it on the board, and you can check whether it's legal. And that's the only thing, is just checking things for yourself. You're checking kind of your knowledge and what you've got prior knowledge to. For Hephaestus and for Chronos, you've still got to do the same. Is their milestone correct? Is it in common knowledge area? Is it out in the public display? If they haven't got knowledge of it, they can't obviously invent it. But other than that, it's going to play really well. I think now, kind of, I don't know, maybe three and a bit games into solo games now, I could probably play a solo game in about an hour and 20 minutes, give or take, depending on your decision space. You know, you will start strategizing and changing depending on where they go. So, you know, it's not, you know, it takes a while to set up, takes a while to put down. You're going to play around about, say, 90 minutes, depending on your decision space. So you're going to have to allow yourself around about 2 hours to play it. And if parts of it click with you to start off, you're not going to want to put it away, because, you know, I love it. I think it's absolutely great. It's rising up in terms of the Lacerdas for me. When I first got it, I thought it was great Lacerda. The more I play it, the more I fall in love with it. And why? It's those strategies. It's understanding the flow of everything. It's understanding those meshing mechanisms, how they fit together. What you can do here on your society board is really, really bloody important as well. And, you know, early games, you're probably all about the main board and not really concentrating on the society board. But as you get these strategies down, this becomes a key part of it, as does your end game scoring conditions as well. Your personal goals, you get score 2 at them at the end of the game. They become important in how you shape your early moves in the game. So for me, I absolutely think that Inventions is not just a worthy addition to the Vita Lacerda canon, but it's you know, it's rising up. You know, personally, Kanban EV is still my favourite. The more I play this is like number 2 or 3 for me at the moment. And as a solo game, I think Shelley and John and Vital have done an absolutely outstanding job in making what could feel like a complex game really manageable, really challenging, and a joy to play. So, if any of that feels of interest to you, then you need to go and check out Inventions by Vita Lacerda, published by Eagle Griffin Game, with a solo mode by Vital, developed by and further developed by Shelley Danielle and John Albertson, on Kickstarter on the 15th of June. The link will be in the description below. I think it's great. I think it's absolutely great, and as I say, it's in the top tier of Lacerdas for me. But it's going to take you a few games to actually get into there. And as a solo gamer, do not attempt to jump straight into the solo game. Please play a few games or a few rounds of a couple of games multi-handed, just to get used to the rules. Once you've done that, it will all start to make perfect sense. So thank you very much for watching me, for joining me on this video through the solo mode of Inventions, Evolution of Ideas by Vita Lacerda. Yeah, go and check it out on Kickstarter. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out our other videos. And one final thought, if you can't find anyone else to play with, there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves. Until next time, bye-bye.